Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. Ready for a deep dive into something you probably haven't thought much about?
I'm intrigued. What is it?
Beds.
Beds. That sounds,
I know, right? But trust me, it's more interesting than you might think.
okay. You've got my attention. I'm ready to dive in.
So think about this. Have you ever pictured yourself, like, sleeping on a pile of leaves? Or maybe a stone box filled with something soft?
Not exactly the Tempur-Pedic I'm used to.
Definitely not. But that's how our ancestors caught some Z's way back when.
And it makes sense, right? They needed comfort and protection just like we do.
Exactly. And get this. Archaeologists found grass bedding in Africa that's, wait for it, 200,000 years old.
200,000. Wow, that's mind-blowing.
I know. And there's more. They even used plants that kept bugs away, like a natural bug spray.
Genius. So even back then, they were thinking about comfort and safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of safety, you know what was a total game changer? Getting those beds up off the ground.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it kept them away from drafts, dirt, and, well, bugs. And probably gave them a better view, too.
Exactly. Plus, no creepy crawlies sneaking into your sleep space. But beds weren't always just about function, right?
Right. As societies got more complex, beds started to reflect, the culture, became a bit more artistic, a bit more luxurious.
Which brings us to ancient Greece and, well, have you ever heard of Odysseus?
Of course. The Odyssey, right? Epic journey home.
You got it. And his bed, let me tell you, that thing was legendary. Carved straight from an olive tree, adorned with gold, silver, ivory, the whole 9 yards.
It's almost more like a throne than a bed, isn't it?
It really is. Shows how important beds were even back then.
Right.
I mean, they even had special beds for different things in ancient Rome.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, you had your lectus cubicularis for sleeping, obviously.
Okay, makes sense.
But then they had the lectus discubitorius for, get this, eating.
Wait, they had a specific bed for eating? That's wild.
I know, right? I guess they really like to recline while enjoying their meals. And we can't forget about the Egyptians. Talk about luxury.
Yeah, they were all about extravagance. I mean, some of their beds were even covered in gold.
Now, that's what I call a statement piece.
So are you ready for a fast forward through time?
Hit me with it.
Okay, picture this. It's medieval Europe, and you're about to climb into bed. But instead of your comfy mattress, you've got a pile of mattresses.
A pile. Like multiple mattresses stacked on top of each other.
Yep. And they weren't filled with the fancy stuff we have now. Think straw, feathers, sometimes even pea shucks.
Ouch. That doesn't sound very comfortable.
Not exactly. But, even those medieval beds eventually got a serious upgrade.
Yeah, they started adding some style. Right. I've seen pictures of those beds with all the intricate carvings and fancy fabrics.
Exactly. And that's where we start to see those iconic four-poster beds emerging in the 14th century.
Ah, yes, the four-poster bed. Not just about comfort anymore, but a status symbol. Like, look at me, I can afford all these fancy drapes and decorations. Right. And speaking of prized possessions, feather beds became all the rage during that time. They were like the medieval equivalent of a top-of-the-line mattress today.
Makes sense. I mean, who wouldn't want a super comfy bed, especially back then?
And speaking of status and beds, have you ever heard of the bed of justice tradition in France?
Bed of justice. I can't say I have. What's that all about?
So imagine the king, right? But he's not on a throne. He's reclining on this elaborate bed, and he's presiding over parliament.
Wow. Ruling a country from bed, that's next-level power move.
Right. It really shows how intertwined beds have been with, well, everything throughout history.
Absolutely.
And before we move on to even more fascinating bed facts, I want to remind everyone listening, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what's coming next. We've got some juicy stories to share.
Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Okay, so 18th century France, what about it?
Well, you won't believe this. Women used to receive guests in their beds.
Wait, what? Like for a visit? In bed?
Yep. It was totally normal back then. Social calls, discussions, all happening from the comfort of their beds.
Wow. Can you imagine today? It's like, oh, sorry, I can't meet up. I'm in my pajamas. But back then, pajamas were the dress code.
Right. It really makes you think about how things have changed. But speaking of changes, we can't forget about inventions that, well, revolutionized how we live.
Okay, I'm curious. What kind of invention are we talking about?
The hideaway bed. That ingenious creation that basically saved apartment dwellers everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Sarah E. Good, right? That woman was ahead of her time. Small apartments, big dreams. She found a way to make it work.
Exactly. It's amazing how a simple invention can have such a huge impact.
Absolutely. And speaking of innovations, think about all the different types of beds we have today. I mean, you've got adjustable beds, bunk beds, water beds.
Don't forget those space-age sleep pods you see in sci-fi movies. Maybe
Yeah.
one day those will be a thing.
Right. It's kind of mind-blowing how much beds have evolved to fit our needs and, well, our lifestyles.
Totally. But you know what's really interesting? Beds haven't just been part of our everyday lives. They've played a role in some pretty big historical events, too.
Oh, I'm all ears. Give me an example.
Okay, so I was reading about the French Revolution the other day,
Yeah.
and there was this event called the Day of Tiles. Ever heard of it?
Day of Tiles rings a bell. It was in 1789, right? Something about a riot.
You got it. So basically, there was all this tension building up in Paris. And then a young man was shot by royal troops. And, well, people were already on edge, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Things were pretty volatile back then.
Exactly. So they laid the young man's body on a bed and paraded it through the streets. And that image, the bed, the body, it became this incredibly powerful symbol.
Wow. I bet that really fueled the flames of the revolution.
Oh, absolutely. People were outraged.
Yeah.
And then, well, they started tearing up roof tiles to use as weapons against the soldiers. Hence, the Day of Tiles.
That's crazy. I would have never guessed a bed could be such a catalyst for historical change.
It's pretty amazing, right? It just shows how everyday objects can take on a whole new meaning in times of upheaval.
Absolutely. You never know what might spark a revolution.
So as you can see, beds have been much more than just places to sleep. They've been at the center of social customs, symbols of power, inspirations for inventors.
And even silent witnesses to some of history's most pivotal moments.
Exactly. We've only scratched the surface of this surprisingly deep topic, and there's so much more to explore. From those early piles of leaves to those crazy, luxurious Egyptian beds to the four-poster beds. We've come a long way, haven't we?
We really have. And who knows what the future holds, right? Maybe we'll all be snoozing in those sci-fi sleep pods someday.
Maybe. But let me ask you this. If you could design your ultimate dream bed, what would it be like?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Well, it would definitely have to be super comfy, of course. Maybe some of that ancient Egyptian extravagance thrown in. What about you?
I think I'd steal a page from our ancestors' playbook and include some of those natural bug-repelling plants. All natural sleep protection.
Smart move. But really what we've learned today is that a bed is so much more than just a place to crash at night.
It really is. It's a reflection of, well, us.
Yes.
Our history, our culture, how we view comfort.
Exactly. And it makes you think, right? The next time you're getting ready for bed, all those stories, all those dreams, they've all played out in beds throughout history.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it that way. So to everyone listening, next time you climb into bed, take a moment to think about all those who came before you, resting, dreaming, living their lives, all in bed.
It's a pretty incredible legacy, and hopefully we've given everyone a newfound appreciation for the humble bed.
I hope so too.
Hey.
Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of beds. Until next time, sleep well, everyone.
Sleep tight.